And we are live. Hello, hello. Saludos. Buenas noches. Buenas tardes. We are live from Los Angeles, California. That is where I reside. So shout out to the West Coast. Also want to show some love to everyone else that's tuning in from different parts of the world. Welcome. I'm so excited that you're sharing this evening with me today. We are going to have such an amazing webinar today because not only am I'm going to be able to share with you um, different strategies on how we nurture and take care of our mental and emotional well-being, but we're also going to have a special guest that's going to be with us in just a moment to tell us a little bit about her story. But before I introduce her and go into that, let me first off by introducing myself. um, Hold on, let me fix this because I'm not liking. One second. No, I'm still trying to figure out how to work this. Bear with me. It's not what I want. One moment. Ah, all right. So I think this is there we go. That's how I wanted to look. Anyway, so thank you for being here. Again, today we're going to talk about nurturing your well-being, and we're going to talk about self-care tips specifically for Latinas. And so, for those of you that were here last week, my name is Norma Garcia. Welcome you again. For those that this is your first time joining us, this is our second week that we've launched our Latina mental health workshop series. So if you're just tuning in today, you haven't missed much. You've only been live, our second time. So we're happy that you're here. As we're doing, today's, presentation, webinar, make sure that, you drop in the comments below, say hello, drop where you're from, and let us also know, since we are going to be talking about self-care, what is your favorite self-care activity? Alrighty, so again, my name is Norma. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and inner healing coach, specifically for Latinas. I'm first generation Mexican American. Over the past 10 years, I have devoted my time, my energy to helping underserved and underprivileged communities. So I've had a lot of work within our Latino community. In most recent years, I've also pivoted my focus in helping high-driven Latinas improve their mental health, break generational trauma. I know these days, where there's this movement about, breaking us being cycle breakers, and also just empowering and helping Latinas be able to heal and become their most authentic self. And so, as a mental health therapist and also as a first gen Latina, it is my mission to advocate for mental health and also help you in your healing journey. So, for me, it's a privilege to be here, and it's such an honor to share this space with all of you. So, why don't we get started? Because there's so many things that we're going to talk about today. I want to make sure that you get everything that you're hoping to get to out of today. So, let's begin. So, self care. Now, self-care is one of my favorite topics that I love to teach my clients because I feel that in everything that we do, it encompasses all of this, right? And just by how the name implies, right? Self-care, which means, taking care of ourselves, and what does that mean? And so before we even get into talking about what self care is, we first have to understand as Latinas how we've learned about self care, how we, because of our culture, our upbringing, how, there's also like stigma related to, self care, that self care is, it means that you're being selfish. As Latinas, we've kind of been trained or conditioned to self sacrifice, right? That we sacrifice ourselves for others, right? That we prioritize other people's needs, right, before ourselves. And our culture is all about la familia, right? We serve. As Latina women, right, we are caretakers, we are mothers, right? We take care of the family, right? So this is something that we really need to understand, that this idea of like self-sacrifice versus self-care, because self-care is not something that we were taught to do, right? So in understanding that, right, we can start looking at self-care in a different way. Another thing I like to mention about this, is about how, as children, right, we're growing up to, again, be serving and do things for others that it's at the cost of our own, self-worth, of us taking care of ourselves. So I'm so happy that we get to have this conversation today. So that way we can, break some of, those old habits or old conditions that we have and create new ones that are going to serve us. So, in doing this too, it's also about rethinking, right, what self care means to us specifically in our culture, right? What this means is really thinking about our traditions, right, our healing practice, right? Even if we think of our grandparents, our ancestors, right, early on, right, they've already been doing self care, right? And we see this in different ways, right, in terms of like how the things that our grandparents did as in their form of like their self-care. So it's important to understand, right, like how these traditions and these healing practices, right, how they affect us and how it comes into our lives. And what I mean by this is thinking about what is it that makes us feel like we belong. How do we create a sense of community? It's also understanding, right, our history, right, our family history, our culture history. What traditions are true in our family. It's also about being able to embrace the idea of like storytelling, right? Like, how do we tell our stories to others, right? Being able to find people that we can trust and feel comfortable with to share our experiences and our feelings. It's also about being able to explore our spirituality, right? What brings us meaning? How can we connect with something that is higher than us? And also, how do we cultivate joy, right? Like, what are our values, right? How is it that what we do aligns, with the things that we value and bring us joy? So as we think about how we incorporate, self-care, it's also about learning specifically in our culture how we as Latinas have taken care of ourselves and how we can also shift, right, into a self-care that's going to be, more beneficial to us. And so the other part of this is what I like to call is incorporate the Latina wisdom. And what I mean by this is, as I was mentioning earlier, right, growing up, I don't know how it was in your family. However, I remember like my mom when she would, for her, it was about keeping the house clean, right? And she would use specific cleaning products, right? I don't know if you guys, know the product Fabuloso or whatnot. So just even thinking about like my upbringing, right? How like my mom, for her, was about keeping the house clean, right? And for my mom, that was her way of self-care, right? So even thinking about again how just even like our parents and our grandparents, how they were already doing things to take care of themselves without really calling it, self-care. Other things I can think of, is, when we're cleaning, right, we're putting music on, we're dancing. So there's like this culture component that we add to our self care. So our, what the traditional self care may look like, right, may be different for us because of the way that we connect, the way that we, heal in community, the way that we use music, the way that we use our food. Um, so it's important, to incorporate some of this wisdom that we already have within us, right? It just wasn't taught to be as like this is self care, and it's kind of like two dualities, right? In terms of like, well, we were conditioned to not be selfish, right? To serve others. At the same time, our ancestors were already practicing self care. And so the last part of this, now that we looked at it from like a cultural lens in terms of our upbringing, in terms of like, the traditional self-care versus like the self-care that we believe, works for us, right? Is really looking at self-care in different areas, right? So these different areas that I taught that I have here: physical, mental, emotional, financial, spiritual, professional. And there's actually a few more, but just for today, I just wanted to focus on these, and pretty much these are different areas of our life, and these are different areas that we need to nurture on a daily basis, right? So self care isn't about waiting for you to be in crisis, waiting for you to be burnt out, right? It's about a daily practice to take care of your mind, of your body, and your soul, right? And this self-care can look different for everyone, right? But I think within our Latina culture, as I was talking about earlier, there's some commonalities, right? So when we think of physical self-care, right, it's about how do we take care of our body, right? How are we nurturing our body? Are we eating healthy? Are we getting enough sleep? Are we drinking enough water? Right. When we think of our mental, right, our mind, how are we stimulating our mind? How are we relaxing our mind? And this could be different things such as, how to reduce our stress level, whether it's like learning something new. Maybe sometimes it means, detoxing from social media. um, this could also mean perhaps like reading or meditating or even just slowing it down, and taking deep breaths. Um, Emotional, right? How do we take care of our emotions? How do we express our emotions in a healthy way, right? How is it that when we are feeling our emotions, right, that we sit with them, that we cope with them? And something here for emotional that I really like to talk about is like boundaries, right? How do we set boundaries, right, to take care of our emotions? And boundaries is a whole different topic that I can definitely do at a different time, right? But boundaries is about, having inner peace, right? And a lot of times we struggle as Latinas to set boundaries because we feel guilty, we feel bad. And sometimes, our family or our friends also make us feel bad because we're making that boundary. So part of the emotional self-care is being able to set healthy boundaries, whether it's, your personal relationships, your romantic relationships, and even in your professional in the professional setting as well. Next, we move on to spiritual, as I was mentioning earlier, right? It's being able to connect to something that's higher than you. This could be religion. This could be, nature. This could be prayer. This could be going on a walk. So anything that you feel that adds meaning to you. Um, and then we have, like I said, professional, right? Like how are we taking how are we taking care of ourselves at our jobs? One thing is that we are at work for many hours of our days, right? And so sometimes there's a lot of stress that comes from being at work. And so it's really important that while you are at work, right, are you making sure that you're taking breaks? Are you making sure that you are leaving when you're supposed to be leaving? Are you making sure that you're not taking extra responsibilities or tasks that, are overwhelming for you, right? So thinking about how do you also incorporate, some self-care in your job as well. And lastly, we have financial, right? Like how do we take care of our finances? How are we responsible? Are we budgeting, right? Are we making sure that we're paying our bills on time, right? How are we spending our money? I think that, finances and our money is something that can cause a lot of stress. So it's important also to think about, what self-care practices you can add in terms of your finances, right? So I know that I covered a lot. I said a lot in terms of, just self care and the different areas. I'm more than happy, in other presentations to kind of hone in on a specific thing. But I also wanted to make sure that we give a welcome and some time to our special guest to talk about her own journey in terms of how she has incorporated self care in her life, and also how she has navigated through, her own personal, family, mental health difficulties. And so I definitely, we wanted to give information in terms of like what is self care, but we also wanted to give you a story of someone, right, that can share with us how she has incorporated and practiced, self-care. Because self-care is something, it's a lifelong process. It's something that we continually have to checking in with ourselves and asking, okay, where we're at, what do I need today? Like, where am I low? Where am I high? So it is my great honor to introduce April Garcia. I'm so excited that she's here. She is amazing. I will let her, introduce herself and tell you all the amazing things about herself. But I'm just so honored that she's here. So why don't we welcome her, April Garcia? And also just before she gets started, some of the mental health topics that she is going to be bringing up. She is going to mention suicide. So if at any point, if you feel that the topics get too sensitive or you are being triggered because the material can be a bit heavy, I welcome you, to step away, take a break. If you need to leave the webinar, that's absolutely okay. But please, 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 do something, to take care of yourselves today. So let's welcome April.
Hey.
Hey.
So nice to be here. Hi, everybody. First off, thank you, Norma, for the introduction and the background. That's amazing. And thank you for hosting and Latina professionals for creating this space for us to talk. So I'd say, and I'm going to get emotional because it's a very touching story for me. It's taken me almost 20 years to share my story. So I'd say my first kind of reach or exposure to any mental health disorder of any kind was when I was about 11, 12 years old. My cousin died by suicide. And then a few years later, my brother also died by suicide. So those were very hard things at a very young age. I was 14 and it was my older brother. He was 17. After that, I really became a parent for myself. I became a parent to my parents. Looking back at that time, I'd say yes, I was definitely depressed, not prioritizing any mental health, any physical health, just kind of, going through the motions. And then, as I mentioned, trying to parent my parents and make sure they were okay. And a lot of the advice that was given to me by family was, be strong. You have to be strong for your family. You have to be strong for your parents. And I don't think people realize that was a lot. That was a big ask of somebody still developing, still learning themselves, still learning life and their path. I've been exposed to gang violence, crime. I grew up in a low-income family. I grew up in an abusive home. So being exposed to those things, I feel like my mindset was just to keep going, to be strong, to get through it, to work through it. And I think, when I look back in my professional career, that helped me so much because it was like, don't focus on anything, just keep going. And hard work pays off. And it was just working hard and focusing on that. And, I was the first in my family to graduate high school. Then I went on to earn a trade certificate, and then I went to earn my associates and my bachelor's and my master's. And I think education was really the thing that freed me and saved me until I got to a point of about 24, 25, and I was like, wow, like I really need to prioritize my mental health. I need to process these things. I need to figure out how I can support myself, because for so long I was supporting and pleasing everybody else because I was told to be strong through it all.
Yeah. And you know what, April, I just want to say how brave you are, and just, being here, we're all getting to know each other, we're all connecting, and for you just to share your story, I just want to, just praise you and commend you, because I know it's not easy to get on here and, share, something that's very intimate and personal and emotional as
very emotional. Yeah.
I know that this is part of your healing process and whatnot. And I'm curious to know, how have you been able, to incorporate, taking care of yourself and what that means to you? And
yeah, I think I've done a lot of work in just kind of surrounding myself with such a supportive group. I mean, you can see in the comments, a lot of people showed up to support me today, and that means a lot. But yeah,
community, right? We heal in community. We heal together. We can't do this alone. And just even in this room, right? Like you and I, and everyone that's here.
Yeah. So that was a job in itself, right? Setting boundaries, really cutting off those family members, and it's hard because they are family, and it's engraved in us that our family first, and that's what that's supposed to be our support system, but I found my chosen family to be so much more supportive and understanding, and really see the situation through my eyes and the things that I went through instead of, you know, how somebody else saw the situation. So creating boundaries, and that's hard. That's probably one of the hardest things because, you know, again, it's just engraved in you. Familia, stay with your family. Family first. Blood is thicker than water. And then, you know, finding little things that make me happy. You know, long baths, sound baths, Reiki healing. You know, getting more in touch with some spiritual practices that I felt, you know, more close to or more holistic approaches of, you know, those things than, you know, going to church and praying. There's some people that works for them, but unfortunately, due to the circumstances with my cousin and my brother, I couldn't see a balance there because so many people, you know, didn't want to say that, you know, that they died by suicide, that it was an accident, or that they had, you know, so and so had a drug addiction, and, you know, and I had to say my truth, and I had to move in life the way that felt right for me.
Yeah. Wow, April, again, you know, we're just so happy that you're here, and you know, just to give light of the importance of being able to be in a safe space to talk about this, but also, you know, as in honor of this month, right? Even just in honor of why we even started these webinars, right? Because it's important that we talk about this, that we raise awareness, right? I know that there's a lot of people that may be struggling with the same things, and once you speak up, you know, it resonates for them, and it's like, oh my gosh, like she spoke up, you know, and by sharing your story, and I know within our culture, like storytelling, you know, if we think of like our ancestors, like it's something that we do, right? But at the same time, it's something that we also keep private.
Yeah.
Right? Porque ¿qué van a decir la gente? Te van a juzgar, right? It's so many layers, you know, but by having this space and even just you, again, sharing your story, right? You're already breaking the cycle, right?
Hopefully. Yeah,
and hard.
Yeah, and even going back to, like, you know, the loss of my brother, you know, my family, a lot of my family members still to this day will say that my brother was murdered. And it was hard because I went through the first few years of grieving him as angry that someone could do this to my brother. And I had to grieve that process to later come back and find that, no, he died by suicide, you know, and start that process over again. And it's still something that triggers me. It's still something that's difficult to talk about. But I I met a woman a few months back at a conference, and just within a few minutes of talking to her, she told me that I was made for hard things. And I truly believe that. I think I'm the person that will stand up and say what I believe, stand up for other people, create community, to make it easier on other people, right? To break stigmas, whether it's, you know, mental health awareness, whether it's education, right? Like, you know, I went through my whole education process alone. I was, you know, the first in my family to graduate high school. So finding community, building that support system, it was everything for me. It's still everything for me. And then, you know, finding a good therapist, reaching out, doing an interview with them, per se, if that's what you want to call it, and really mingling with them and finding somebody that you make that connection, that you feel safe enough to discuss these things and process these things and figure out the things that work for you, because not every therapist is one fits all, right?
And I think you said it beautifully, right? That we ourselves need to find our own recipe of what's going to work, right?
Yeah.
And I myself, as a therapist, of course, I'm very biased. I'm like, everybody needs therapy, but in all honesty, therapy is just one source
I
of healing,
agree.
right? It's about figuring out what else can you pull from in terms of like your strength, your faith, and especially, since we're so connected, right, in community, right, that when we work together, when we support each other, when we understand each other, right, the much
Mhm.
more powerful um, and more healed, right, we're going to be, so I invite all of you, just to think about, how it is that you can start, incorporating, self-care if you're already doing it. That's amazing, but how can you continue, doing it? Because I know for me, like I have waves, right, where
Mhm.
like some days I'm like so good at it, other days I suck at it, right? And because just the flows of our emotions, right?
And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I've learned to do really well, is to kind of step in when I'm at good energy, when I can really provide the support that other people are going to seek, right? Whether that's working on the nonprofit side or with education, even at in a professional setting at my work, is I can step in when energy is high and things are good. And when I feel off, when I don't feel at my best, take a step back of reevaluating, getting that self care in, which a lot of the times it's spending time with my dog. He's my emotional support animal. And I know that's kind of talked about a lot now, as like, oh, everybody has one. Well, people need them. They provide a type of companionship and non-communication, like non-verbal, that sometimes you need. There's a lot of times where I get overstimulated, or I'm talking so much at work and interacting at work that when I come home, I just want to kind of seclude and cuddle with my dog. And that's that reset that I need.
Yeah, amazing. April, as we have just a few minutes left, I'm wondering, what message or what would you like, those that are here with us, to take away from today?
Um, I think it's really learning. I hope that for one, everybody can just share. I don't think there's such a thing as oversharing. And if someone that you tell your story to thinks you're oversharing, then maybe they're just not ready or at the same, healing or process or area where you're at in your life. But share your story, communicate to other people, tell them how you're feeling. And the people who are going to receive that, those are the ones that are going to be in your group. Those are the ones that are going to be in your corner, being your mentor, your sponsor. But you have to be vulnerable enough to put yourself out there. um, I think for a long time too, I felt that suicide followed me. Mental health issues followed me, that people would come and just tell me these things. And now looking back on it, where I am now in my life, looking back on it, it's like I survived a lot of really hard things,
Yeah,
and I have to be in service.
yeah,
I have to be in service to receive these stories, to support someone else, to motivate them to do the same thing that I did.
yeah.
Um, I hope that's what everyone can take, is just share, share, and be inclusive. Um, yeah.
Beautiful, April. Well, again, I don't know how much, I can just say, how brave you are. You showed up. You being here is you being vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? And I know that's also, part of like your healing process as well. Um, and so again, thank you so much just for taking the time, for sharing this space, for the beautiful, words of encouragement and messages that you gave us today. I know that I took away a lot, and even just by having this conversation with you has really impacted me. And so, again, thank you. And I don't know if anyone else has any specific questions for April. I'm sure she is willing to address any questions that you may have, or if not, any, questions regarding in terms of like self-care. I was able to read a few of the comments, and I know there was a request for a list of therapists, so we can make sure There's different directories that are specific for Latinas, so we can make sure that we get that information out to you. I did want to share also, lastly, I do have here some mental health resources. These are websites and phone numbers that you can access. Most of them are national, so wherever you are, they do apply to you. But just for you to, again, read more, get more insightful in terms of, you know, the information that's out there and also our resources. I don't have it here, but again, I can provide you guys also with different directories of where you can access, you know, Latina therapists. I do feel that being able to connect and feel, you know, there's some cultural competency with the therapist, you know, makes a huge difference. And I see you nodding, April, that's true. um, so again, thank you all for being here. You know, I hope that today you do something to take care of yourself. And it would, you know, I saw a lot of comments of people also, you know, using, you know, plants, you know, dogs, boundaries, community healing and community. So I love that. And thank you all for sharing and for being here. And we will see you all next week, same time.